The first time I heard a child's voice in my apartment, I thought I was hallucinating. After all, my roommate had made it clear lived alone. No family, no drama, just two guys splitting rent. But then those tiny hands clutched my jeans, and a little voice called me Dad. While my new roommate's face froze in sheer panic, I stood there, speechless, staring at the child who couldn't have been more than 4 years old, clinging to me like I'd always belonged to him. My heart pounded so hard it drowned out every logical thought. And in that charged silence, I finally saw what my roommate had been hiding behind his guarded eyes and late-night absences. His name was Ethan, the man who'd suddenly appeared in my life through a college bulletin board listing. Roommate wanted, no drama, no noise. He had seemed like the perfect match, quiet, neat, and willing to split the bills on time. But what the flyer hadn't mentioned was the small boy now staring up at me with big, trusting eyes. His arms wrapped around my waist as though he'd been waiting for me all along. "Caleb?" Ethan whispered, his voice low and rough. "I can explain." But could he? Because right then, all I could think was, how the hell do you explain a kid who just called your roommate Dad? I wasn't supposed to care. I wasn't supposed to feel anything at all. Moving in here was supposed to be a practical decision, a way to escape the suffocating loneliness of my old dorm and the chaos of my fractured family. But now, staring at Ethan, watching the way his shoulders tensed as he reached for his son, I felt a strange mix of betrayal and something else, something softer, something terrifying. The boy's name was Noah. I learned that quickly because he wouldn't let go of me until Ethan gently pried him away, murmuring reassurances that sounded more like apologies. Noah clutched a worn-out stuffed dinosaur, and even when Ethan held him close, his eyes kept flicking back to me, wide and hopeful. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this," Ethan finally said once Noah had settled with a juice box on the couch, swinging his legs happily like nothing had just exploded between us. "I should have told you from the start." "Yeah," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "You think?" Ethan flinched. For someone who usually carried himself with a quiet, almost intimidating composure, he suddenly looked fragile, like one wrong word might shatter him completely. "I'm sorry," he said softly. I've lost roommates before. No one wants to live with a single dad. They don't want the responsibility, the noise, the complications. I couldn't risk losing the place. Not again." His words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I'd expected excuses, maybe even lies. But all I saw was fear of being abandoned. Fear of failing the little boy now sipping juice and humming to himself. And beneath that fear was something else. Love so fierce it seemed to burn through every sacrifice Ethan had made. And suddenly my anger cracked. Because for all the secrets and the shock, I couldn't ignore the way my chest tightened when Noah smiled at me, or the way Ethan's voice trembled when he confessed the truth. The days that followed were messier than I ever imagined my life could be. I hadn't planned on becoming part of someone else's family. I was 20, still trying to figure out my own path, still fighting off the ghosts of a childhood where love had felt conditional, where affection came with strings attached. But Noah didn't care about any of that. To him, I was just Caleb, the guy who shared his mac and cheese, the guy who lifted him onto his shoulders at the grocery store when Ethan was too tired, the guy who read him stories at night when Ethan worked late shifts. And Ethan was an enigma I couldn't stop unraveling. He was only 26, but sometimes he carried himself like he'd lived 100 years. There were nights I'd hear him pacing in the kitchen long after Noah had fallen asleep, the weight of bills and responsibilities heavy in his silence. There were mornings when he'd brew coffee with the precision of a soldier, as if the ritual kept him from falling apart. And then there were rare, fleeting moments when he'd really laugh, and the sound was so warm it made my chest ache. But what scared me most was the way he started looking at me. Like he couldn't decide if I was a threat to his carefully guarded world or the one person who might keep it from collapsing. It all came to a head one rainy evening. I'd been helping Noah build a pillow fort in the living room when Ethan came home, soaked through from a double shift at the diner. His hair clung to his forehead, his shirt plastered to his skin, exhaustion radiating from every line of his body. And yet, when he saw me sitting there with his son giggling in my lap, Something flickered in his eyes, something raw and unspoken. You didn't have to, he murmured later, when Noah had finally fallen asleep in the fort, clutching his dinosaur. Didn't have to what? I asked. Stay. Help. Be here. His gaze dropped, his fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. You could have left the moment you found out. Most people would have. I swallowed hard because he wasn't wrong. A part of me had wanted to run, to avoid the mess of emotions tangled between us. But every time I looked at Noah's smile, every time I saw Ethan's tired eyes soften when his son hugged him, something inside me refused to walk away. Maybe I'm not most people, I said quietly. Ethan's head snapped up, and for the first time, I saw it clearly, the longing he tried so hard to bury, the walls he'd built to protect himself and his son, beginning to crack. And in that moment I knew, this wasn't just about being roommates anymore. This was about something bigger, something scarier. Something that might just rewrite the very meaning of home. I wish I could say things got simpler after that night, but they didn't. If anything, they got messier like feelings always do when you try to ignore them. Ethan and I fell into the strange rhythm. He'd work late shifts, I'd help Noah with dinner and bedtime, and somehow, between grocery runs and pillow forts, I started to feel less like a stranger in their apartment and more like, I don't know, something else, something dangerous. It wasn't intentional. At least that's what I told myself. But then there were moments that tore through every defense I tried to build. Like when Noah had a nightmare and came stumbling into my room at 2 a.m, crawling under my blanket before I could even blink. Or when Ethan, exhausted, had leaned against the wall one evening, watching me stir spaghetti on the stove, and muttered, I can't remember the last time someone else cooked for us. Those weren't the kinds of things you forget. They burrow under your skin, quiet but undeniable. And yet, for all the closeness, Ethan kept a distance. He never touched me unless it was accidental, his hand brushing mine as we passed plates, his shoulder knocking against me when we squeezed onto the couch. He never said anything that crossed the line from gratitude into affection. But his eyes betrayed him. Because whenever I laughed with Noah, whenever I stayed up late helping with coloring books or reading bedtime stories, Ethan would watch me with this look. Like he was both terrified and relieved. Like he wanted to believe in me but didn't dare. One Saturday, it all came crashing closer than I could handle. We'd promised Noah a day at the park. The sun was out, rare for that season, and Noah had insisted on bringing his entire collection of toy trucks. Ethan and I sat on the grass, half watching as Noah raced across the playground, his laughter carrying over the sounds of children shouting and parents chatting. You're good with him, Ethan said suddenly. I glanced at him. He was leaning back on his elbows, his sunglasses shielding his eyes, but his voice was softer than usual, almost vulnerable. He's easy to be good with, I said. He likes everyone. Ethan gave a short laugh. That's not true. He's picky. He doesn't take to people easily. Guess I'm the exception. I teased lightly, though my throat tightened at his words. Yeah, he murmured, and for a moment, there was no teasing in his tone, just something heavy, meaningful. The silence stretched, filled only by the distant sound of Noah's giggles. And then Ethan shifted, sitting up, his hands knotting together. Caleb, I need to ask you something, he said, his jaw tight. I braced myself. Do you resent this? Him? Us? The question hit me like a punch. Resent, I repeated. You didn't sign up for this? He said quickly, his words tumbling over each other like he'd been holding them back too long. You moved in expecting quiet, simple. Instead, you're helping raise a kid that isn't yours. Sometimes I worry you feel trapped here. For a second, I couldn't answer, because trapped was the last word I'd use. No, I said firmly. I don't resent it. Not even close. His eyes finally met mine, and for once, I could see past all the walls. He looked at me like he wanted to believe me, but didn't know how. Before I could say more, Noah came running back, throwing himself into my lap with a squeal. Daddy Caleb, come play trucks. Ethan froze. My chest lurched. Daddy Caleb? I echoed. my voice barely above a whisper. Noah grinned up at me like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Yeah, you're my other dad. I glanced at Ethan, expecting him to correct it, to explain. But he didn't. He just sat there, stunned, his lips parted, his hands flexing uselessly in the grass. And in that moment, something inside me shifted, because Noah wasn't wrong. I wasn't his father, not by blood, not by law, but in the quiet ways that mattered. I'd become something close. And judging by the way Ethan was looking at me now, torn between fear and something achingly hopeful, he knew it too. That night, the air between us was heavy with unspoken words. After Noah had fallen asleep, I lingered in the kitchen, cleaning dishes just to avoid the silence. Ethan eventually joined me, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. You don't have to encourage that, he said finally, his voice low. Encourage what? Noah calling you. He trailed off, shaking his head. That. I dried my hands on a towel, heart pounding. I didn't tell him to. He came up with it on his own. That doesn't mean you should let him keep doing it. His tone was sharper now, edged with panic. Why not? I asked. Because it's confusing, he snapped. For him. For you. For me. The words cut deeper than I expected, and for a moment, I couldn't find a reply. Then, quietly, I asked, or is it just scary? Ethan's head jerked up. His eyes were stormy, full of battles he wasn't ready to fight. You don't understand, he said tightly. Noah's all I have. I can't risk him getting attached to someone who won't stay. The unspoken truth hung between us. He didn't trust me. Not yet. I'm not planning on leaving, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. He stared at me, searching for cracks in my resolve. And when he found none, his shoulders slumped. Don't make promises you can't keep, he whispered, before turning and disappearing into his room. I stood there alone, my hands trembling, my heart aching, because for the first time, I realized I wanted to keep that promise. I wanted to stay. Not just for Noah, for him. The next week tested everything. Ethan's schedule at the diner grew heavier, and I found myself stepping deeper into their lives. I picked Noah up from daycare. I packed his lunches. I learned how to braid his shoelaces when he insisted he needed the double loop like Daddy makes. I became part of their daily rhythm, seamlessly, almost dangerously. And every time Ethan came home to find me curled up on the couch with Noah asleep against my chest, his expression wavered, caught between gratitude and something deeper he couldn't allow himself to name. The tension stretched tighter with every passing day, until it finally snapped. It was late, well past midnight. I was on the balcony, the cool air biting against my skin, when Ethan slid the door open and joined me. He held 2 mugs of coffee, setting one beside me before leaning against the railing. We didn't speak at first. The city hummed quietly below, a constant reminder that life went on no matter how tangled ours became. Finally, Ethan said, I shouldn't want this. I turned to him. Want what? This, he said, gesturing between us. You, the way you've slipped into Noah's life, into mine. His voice cracked. It's dangerous. I can't let myself need someone who might walk away. The raw honesty in his tone nearly undid me. I'm not walking away, I said. You can't know that. I do, I insisted. Because the truth is, I want this too. His eyes widened, shock flickering into something else, longing, fear, desire, all tangled together. And before I could second guess it, I closed the space between us. Our lips met, tentative, desperate, aching with everything we'd tried to bury. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't neat, but it was real. When we pulled back, breathless, Ethan's forehead rested against mine. You don't know what you're signing up for, he whispered. Maybe not, I admitted, my heart racing. But I know what I want. And in that fragile, impossible moment, I realized I'd already fallen. The kiss lingered in my mind long after Ethan had retreated to his room. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every second the hesitant press of his lips, the way his breath had caught, the trembling in his shoulders as if he were holding back a flood. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a crack in the armor he'd built around himself. But the morning after, he avoided me. He moved through the apartment with military precision, making Noah's breakfast, packing his lunch, tying his shoelaces, all while keeping his eyes carefully averted. When I tried to catch his gaze, he mumbled something about being late for work and left before I could say a word. The slam of the door left a hollow echo in the room. Noah, oblivious, climbed onto my lap with his stuffed dinosaur. "Daddy Caleb, will you come to the park later?" My chest tightened. "Yeah, buddy. I'll be there." But even as I promised him, my mind was with Ethan, wondering if that kiss had ruined everything, or if it was the start of something we both needed more than we could admit. Days turned into a strange dance of closeness and distance. When Ethan was home, he kept conversations strictly practical. Bills, chores, schedules. But then I'd catch him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking, his expression softening in ways he couldn't hide. And every night, I lay awake wondering if he was doing the same. The tension stretched tighter and tighter, until one evening it snapped. I had just tucked Noah into bed when Ethan appeared in the doorway. His hair was damp from the shower, his t-shirt clinging to his chest, and his eyes, those guarded, stormy eyes, looked almost haunted. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. We sat on the couch, silence pressing between us until he finally spoke. "That night," he began slowly, "on the balcony, I shouldn't have let that happen." The words stabbed deeper than I expected. I forced a smile that felt brittle. "Right? It was a mistake." "No," his voice sharpened, urgent. "That's not what I mean. It wasn't a mistake. It's just, I don't know how to let myself have this." I turned to him. "Why not?" His hands clenched in his lap. "Because every time I've let someone close, they've left. My family, my ex, even friends who swore they'd stick around. And every time, Noah's the one who pays for it. I can't risk him getting attached to you. Too late." I cut in gently. "He already is, and so am I." Ethan's breath hitched. He stared at me, his eyes searching mine for any trace of hesitation. And when he found none, his walls cracked again, just like they had on the balcony. "God, Caleb," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You scare the hell out of me." "Good," I said softly, "because you scare the hell out of me too." And then, as if pulled by gravity, we kissed again, deeper this time, hungrier, all the pent-up longing crashing free. But love, I learned, wasn't just about moments like that. It was about what came after. The next morning, Ethan didn't run. He made coffee, handed me a mug, and when Noah stumbled in rubbing his eyes, he didn't correct him when he called me Dad. He just smiled, tired, tentative, but real. It felt like the beginning of something fragile, something worth fighting for. But the world outside our apartment wasn't as forgiving. It started at the daycare. One afternoon, I arrived to pick up Noah, and the receptionist gave me a strange look. "Oh, you're not his father, right?" I hesitated. "I live with him, with his dad." Her expression tightened. "Well, we'll need authorization. We can't just release a child to anyone." I swallowed my irritation and explained, eventually leaving with Noah's small hand clutched in mine. But the look in her eyes lingered, a silent judgment I couldn't shake. When I told Ethan about it later, he stiffened. "This is what I mean. People will question, they'll assume, they'll make things harder." "Let them," I said fiercely. "We know what we are." But I could see the fear in his eyes, the fear that society's whispers could tear apart the fragile family we were building. The whispers grew louder when Ethan's ex showed up. I'd known almost nothing about her, Noah's mother. Ethan never spoke of her, and I hadn't pushed. But one Saturday morning, she appeared at our door, sunglasses hiding her eyes, perfume sharp in the air. "Ethan," she said, her voice clipped, "we need to talk." Noah froze, clutching my hand. "Mommy!" My stomach dropped. Ethan's jaw tightened as he ushered her inside, his posture tense. I hovered by the doorway, unsure if I should stay, until Ethan gave me a subtle nod. Her gaze flicked to me, sharp and dismissive. "And you are?" He's my roommate." Ethan cut in quickly. And Noah's friend. The word stung, but I kept quiet. She sighed, tossing her hair. I want to see him more. I've been getting my life together. I deserve a chance. Noah pressed closer to my side, his little fingers trembling against mine. I don't want to, he whispered. Ethan's face twisted with conflict. He's not ready, he said firmly. Her lips curled. Or is it you? You've always been possessive, keeping him away from me, filling his head with whatever lies you've spun. That's not fair, Ethan snapped. I couldn't stay silent. He's protecting his son. Her eyes narrowed at me. And what are you? Some replacement? You think you can play house with someone else's child? The words cut like knives, not because they were true, but because of the venom behind them. Ethan stepped between us, his voice cold. Enough. You don't get to walk in here and insult the people who've been here when you weren't. If you want a relationship with Noah, you'll earn it. But you don't get to tear down what we've built. Her mouth opened in outrage, but Ethan's steel held. Finally, she turned on her heel and stormed out, the slam of the door rattling the walls. Silence filled the room. Noah clung to Ethan now, his face buried in his father's chest. Ethan held him tight, his eyes closing as he whispered reassurances. And when he finally looked at me, his gaze was raw, unguarded. You didn't have to stand up like that, he said softly. Yes, I did, I replied. Because this is my family too. His breath caught. And in that moment, I knew he believed me. The days after were both heavier and lighter. Heavier because the world's eyes seemed to follow us closer. Lighter because inside our apartment there was no hiding anymore. Ethan let me in not just into his routines, but into his heart. We spent evenings cooking together, shoulders brushing, laughter spilling into the kitchen. We shared the couch at night, Noah curled between us, until eventually, the couch gave way to Ethan's bed, where whispers and touches replaced walls and distance. It wasn't perfect. Ethan still battled doubts, still paced the floor some nights when fears crept in. But I was there, always there, reminding him he wasn't alone. And slowly, the man who had once been terrified to trust began to trust again. But love, I was learning, wasn't just about holding on. It was about proving every day that you wouldn't let go. And I was ready to prove it no matter what storms came next. The storm hit us harder than I expected. After his mother's visit, Noah grew clingier, afraid that one morning he might wake up and one of us would be gone. He'd crawl into our bed at night, sandwiched between Ethan and me, his tiny hand gripping mine like an anchor. And though I tried to soothe him, I could feel Ethan's tension radiating in the dark, his fear that the fragile world he'd built was about to collapse. Then came the court notice. She had filed for partial custody. Ethan's face when he read it is something I'll never forget. His hands shook so badly the paper rattled. His lips pale as though the words were knives carving him open. She can't, he whispered. She left. She abandoned him. She doesn't get to come back now and tear him away. I took the paper gently from his hands, my chest tightening. Then we fight. But fighting meant exposure. Lawyers, judges, questions about who lived in the apartment, who cared for Noah, what kind of environment he was growing up in. And in a world that wasn't always kind to people like us, the risk was terrifying. Caleb, Ethan said one night, his voice breaking, maybe it would be safer if you moved out until this is over. The words gutted me. Safer for who? I demanded. For you. For Noah. If the court thinks, no. I cut in sharply. Don't you dare shut me out. Not now. I'm not leaving you. I'm not leaving him. Ethan's eyes filled, the weight of years of abandonment pressing down on him. And when I pulled him into my arms, he finally let himself collapse, sobbing against my chest in a way he'd never allowed before. The court date arrived like a storm cloud. We sat together, Ethan's hand gripping mine under the table, Noah's future hanging in the balance. His mother's lawyer painted a picture of her new stability, her rightful role as a mother. Ours countered with Ethan's record-steady work, consistent care, the undeniable bond between father and son. And then, inevitably, the questions turned to me. Who is he? The judge asked. What role does he play in the child's life? I swallowed hard, my palms sweating. Ethan's lawyer nodded at me gently. Answer truthfully. So I did. I'm Caleb, I said, my voice shaking but steady. I moved in as Ethan's roommate, but somewhere along the way, I became part of their family. I pick Noah up from daycare, I cook his meals, I read him stories at night. He calls me dad sometimes, and I don't correct him, because I love him like he's my own. The courtroom stirred. Ethan's mother's lawyer smirked. So you admit you're confusing the child, presenting yourself as his father when you're not? No, I said firmly. I'm not confusing him. I'm giving him what he already knows. He has a family. Stability. Love. For a moment silence reigned. Then the judge looked at Noah, who was coloring quietly beside us with his dinosaur perched on the table. Noah, the judge asked gently, who do you want to live with? Noah looked up, blinking his big eyes. Then he stood, walked straight to Ethan, and climbed onto his lap. I want Daddy, he said. Then he looked at me, a small smile breaking across his face. And Daddy Caleb. Gasps rippled through the room. Ethan buried his face in Noah's hair, tears sliding silently down his cheeks. And though the proceedings dragged on, though the final verdict took weeks, that moment was the one that stayed burned in my heart. In the end, the judge ruled in Ethan's favor. His mother was granted supervised visitation, but custody remained with him. When the gavel fell, Ethan crumpled in relief, his hand finding mine under the table and holding on as if to say, we made it. We survived. Outside the courthouse, Noah tugged at both our hands. Can we go home now? He asked innocently, like the world hadn't just shifted beneath our feet. Ethan laughed, Ida sound raw with exhaustion but filled with joy. Yeah, buddy, we can go home. And when his eyes met mine, I saw it clearly. Home wasn't just the apartment. It wasn't even just him and Noah anymore. Home was the three of us, together. Life after the storm was quieter, but richer. Ethan no longer held back. He let me in completely, not just into his routines, but into his heart. We cooked breakfast as a family. Noah perched on the counter tossing blueberries into pancake batter. We spent Sundays at the park, Ethan's hand brushing mine as Noah raced ahead. Nights were filled with warmth, Noah asleep in his room. Ethan and I tangled together in the quiet intimacy of love, finally unburdened. There were still challenges, sideways glances at daycare, whispers from neighbors who didn't understand, but they no longer held power over us. Because we knew who we were. We knew what we had. One evening, as we tucked Noah into bed, he mumbled sleepily, I love you, Daddy. I love you too, Daddy Caleb. Ethan kissed his forehead, his eyes shining. We love you too, buddy. And later, as we lay together in the dim light, Ethan turned to me, his voice soft. You saved us, he whispered. I shook my head. No, we saved each other. He smiled then, the kind of smile that carried years of pain but also the promise of healing. And when he kissed me, slow and certain, I knew this was it. The ending of loneliness. The beginning of forever. Because sometimes, family isn't the one you're born into. It's the one you fight for, the one you choose, the one that chooses you back. And in that messy, beautiful apartment, with Ethan's hand in mine and Noah's laughter echoing down the hall, I finally understood what it meant to belong. I was home. Forever. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.